Um, Hello, everybody. Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles here on a Wednesday night with the plucky, committed, wonderful community of proud patriots, our paid subscribers here at Hopium. We're coming up on Friday at our second anniversary. I launched Hopium, it's hard to believe, 2 years ago, March 7th of 2023, in more optimistic times, obviously. But I just want to say that our work together these last few months or 6 weeks, whatever it's been since, 20 years since Trump came back into office, has been really motivating, exciting, and inspiring. And we're sort of learning it's a new muscle. I mean, a lot of the work that we did here at Hopium in the first year and a half was election-oriented work, and all the ways that we impact elections, raising money, lots of money, doing lots of volunteering of all kinds. You guys went to work, and we had a lot of really important wins. And it's really important to level set and remind to do this every few days or once a week that, we beat MAGA in 2018, 2020, 2022, throughout 2023 and early 2024. And we won in these down ballot races all across the country in 2024 as well. Our road back is not that far, right? I mean, we have been beating them regularly. We lost this election and it was bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. But the notion that we've gone through some kind of historic collapse or anything, none of this is true. And the engine that has been driving our success has been all of you. It's been the 6 million people who gave and volunteered for the campaign, who have, propelled us to these victories in a time of national crisis. And what's been interesting about what we've been doing together over the last 6, 7 weeks is we've been taking that same sensibility, that gritty hard work, put one foot in front of the other, have a good day every day, and applying it to the information space, the information war, to challenging Trump's, rancid early days here. And you guys have been through contacting elected officials, calling them, writing them, showing up at town hall meetings, in teletown halls, in outside of their offices, and going to physical protests, working your networks with information to help people get more educated about what we're all doing. That work that you've been doing really, really matters. And how do we know that, right? Two things we learned in the last couple of days. One is Alyssa Slotkin last night, in what was, I think, a terrific speech and an important speech. I'm going to talk about this. Actually talked about how central and important it was that they were hearing from you. And I can tell you from being here and being part of this town for a long time in DC, these calls, these relentless calls that are coming in, the contact has really woken up Democrats and Republicans. And the way we know it is that Republicans have now announced they don't want to do town hall meetings anymore. And also Trump has started freaking out about the protests, right? He's doing a very Trumpian thing, which is, he wants big crowds, he wants adoration, but his poll numbers are going down. There's an active, clear resistance building towards him, opposition building towards him. And he's now repeatedly talking about the fake crowds, threatening young people if they start protesting, right? He's getting spooked by this stuff, as are the Republicans. And it's happening because of all of you. I mean, you weren't told to go do this. You guys have done what this new grassroots of the Democratic Party has been doing since 2017, which is you've just gone and done the work yourselves in a very de Tocquevillian way, this bottom up push that's coming. And one of the things that Heather Cox Richardson and I talked about today in a discussion we had is that it's very, she talked about how all these kinds of moments when we've overcome extraordinary challenges in the United States have usually the way that we've overcome them has been through bottom up, organizing, and not through top down kind of activity. And I hadn't heard her say that before, but you guys have been hearing me talk about how I think that one of the things that's really important is that, that I know that people want our leaders to be doing more, but in some ways, the way this opposition is growing, which is that all of you are just putting your head down, getting together with others, showing up and doing this work on your own, in a bottom up way, pushing your electeds, helping them understand what's expected of them now, which is the central way that we communicate when we reach out to these offices, which is we're helping them understand what is expected of them now, right? Which is something that was different than before, which is they need to counter and fight Trump's ongoing betrayal of the country, the attack on our democracy, all these things, right? Is that we know that this is working. I mean, the main point here is that I think that what we're going to learn when we get to the other side of this and defeat this horrible and come out of the other side of this horrible period is the way this grew through the bottom up, through the way it's happening, will make this more sustainable and effective over time because you guys feel ownership over the work that you're doing. You're not being told what to do, you're doing it yourselves. And as you remember, one of the most important posts that I wrote right after the election was that this was a time for reimagination and reinvention of our politics, that what we had was inadequate. We had to go build a new thing. And you guys are building that new thing, right? You're doing that. You're not working for somebody else to do it. You're doing it through the daily work that you do. And I'm really proud of this. I'll be honest, I'm super proud of what our community does every day. I'm super proud of the chat where all of you are self-reporting what you got done and learning from each other. This is really important work we're doing, everybody, right? We have been a leader in creating this opposition, the Hopium community. There's no question in putting the emphasis not just on elections, but on this other work that has been so central to now spooking the Republicans who are getting worried about this. And so where we are now, let's just level set again. Trump is just an unmitigated disaster, right? In every possible way. He is like everything with Trump, it's always the worst case scenario with him. He is mad. He's gone mad. He is issuing proclamations from Mar-a-Lago and just believing these things have the law and become law just because he writes them. As Heather Cox Christensen said today, they are operating extra constitutionality, extra outside of the Constitution. I'm going to have to figure out exactly the way she said it, but they're acting as if the Constitution doesn't exist. There are no rules and laws, and it is just unbelievable the betrayal of Russia, and I mean the betrayal of Zelensky and Europe, and the embrace of Putin last week. Today, they announced that the weapon systems that we had given to the Ukrainians, we turned off some of them remotely to make it impossible for them to use weapon systems that are already on the ground in Ukraine. So just so we understand that Trump didn't just pull the weapons to cut off intelligence sharing, they're now turning off weapons that are being used on the ground by the Ukrainian military, which is, a hostile action. And that's why the Europeans are really escalating their language about that the United States is now just not openly being neutral. They're actually working clearly to advance Russian interests against the interests of Ukraine and Europe. And it's an extraordinary set of things have happened. But in some ways, the most amazing thing is just the economic illiteracy and insanity of the president's economic plans. I hope all of you realize who are Hopium subscribers that these are things I was writing about over the last year, but specifically after the election, that reality was going to bite for Trump because his plans were a disaster. The plans that he had articulated, the tariffs, the inflationary nature of the tariffs, his budget plan, his willingness to give huge plutocratic tax cuts to wealthy people and cut healthcare spending, healthcare for over 80 million people, that these things were going to be very difficult for him to pull off. And the likelihood would be is that the American economy would start to suffer and his approval rating would go down. And that's exactly what's happened. I mean, this is stuff we've been talking about here since right after the election. I brought on economists to talk about what was the likely scenario. And now where we are is the economy is slowing dramatically. We could have negative GDP growth in this quarter based on current Fed data, which would be an unbelievable collapse of one of the single most robust developed economy in the developed world over the last now many years. He inherited one of the strongest economies in American history, and within a few weeks, he's tanked it, right, incredibly. We know that inflation is rising. We know that interest rates are not coming down because the Fed is worried, right, about rising rising inflation. We know that his economic plan that he embraced in the House today, the CBO issued a finding that there's no question that they're going to make massive Medicaid cuts, which undermines everything that Trump has promised and lied about publicly, including last night, is that they now are contemplating really exploding the deficit, cutting health care for over 80 million Americans, including the most vulnerable in the country, kicking seniors out of old age homes, senior homes, and they're doing it in order to give him and Elon Musk these massive tax breaks. It's insanity. There's no economics behind this. This is just pure, as you've heard me describe before, this is the economic evolution of the Southern strategy, where there's more for us and less for everybody else and those undeserving people. And so what's happening is that the consumer confidence is plummeting under him. His approval rating, as I wrote today, has dropped 9 points in the 538 average, an average, by the way, full of right-wing dear leader polls, as I call them. He's dropped 9 points. In some of the polling, in some of the credible, serious polling, he's dropped 30 points with young people in the last few weeks. He's dropped 15 to 20 points with Hispanic voters. He's now in deeply negative territory repeatedly with independent voters. And his numbers with independent voters are starting to look like Biden's numbers in the period when Biden had to get out of the race. Remember, Biden got out of the race with 55% disapproval rating, 54, 55, 56. It was bouncing around in there. Trump is already at 52, 53% approval rating in some of the public polling we've had in the last few weeks, which is only a couple points away from where Biden was when he had to get out of the race. So the public is souring on him and turning on him. He's seeing the protests. He's being briefed, by the way. He cares a lot about polling. The stuff really matters to him. The size of his victory that he exaggerated and lied about last night, and so on. And the truth is, his numbers are, his numbers have come way down, and he's been warned by his own pollster that if this Republican House bill passes, it's going to do unbelievable damage to the brand of the Republican Party and to Trump, because it's so obviously skewed against working people, and his betrayal of working people, his choice and picking the oligarchs over the rest of us will be clear as day to everyone. And by the way, in 2017, this is exactly what happened. In 2017, in his attempt to unravel the ACA and kill the ACA, his standing as a champion of working people evaporated. And we won that election in 2018, in 2017, in the fight over the ACA. And so Trump, incredibly, not having learned from that, because he is an idiot and he's delusional and he's out of his mind and he's mad, is walking right into another healthcare fight, similar to the healthcare fight that basically gave us one of the biggest midterm victories in modern times in 2018. And so, I look at all this and I think this guy he's a danger. He's making unbelievable mistakes. And his numbers are coming down. And then today, here's what happened, right? And he gave a ridiculous speech last night. Today, they had three consequential losses in the courts. One is the Supreme Court ruled against Trump and ordered that the USAID funding that had been held up be implemented. The second thing is this afternoon, there was another really consequential decision by a judge saying that employees from the Department of Agriculture, almost 6,000 of them, had to be reinstated. These were people who were, what's that term for, right? When you're a new employee, had to be reinstated, and that the firing them was potentially illegal, right? And I'm going to come back to that. And then there was another ruling late this afternoon about NIH. So they had three really consequential, because legally what's starting to happen is there's now a body of court work, including by the Supreme Court, that's putting a brake on what these guys are doing, because it's so obviously fucking illegal and unconstitutional and wrong that even the Supreme Court that's in his back pocket ruled against him today, because the stuff that he and Musk are doing it's not. I just want everyone to be very clear about this. The notion of a chief executive, and the Attorney General of the United States defended this on television yesterday. The notice of a chief executive in a democracy can just decide that he's going to take money away from programs that were passed by the legislative branch and signed into law by a president, There is no form of democracy that would ever allow that. Because if a president can just, or a leader, an executive can just decide on their own that, hey, I don't like this stuff, or by the way, I don't like Zelensky, and I'm going to stop the funding to Ukraine, which is, by the way, the reason that he was impeached in 2020 was over this exact same thing, right? The idea that he can just, like a mad king, say, oh, fuck that. I don't like that. I'm not going to fund that. Then there's no reason to have a legislative branch. Then you don't have a democracy. And so what he and Musk are doing is outside the understanding of what could happen in any democracy that has ever been created, let alone the most important in human history. And so I do think it's really the court cases that happened today were significant. And I think that what we have to recognize is that there are cracks opening up in his congressional support. Where the most intense cracks are around Russia. And this is why Alyssa Slotkin last night hit the Reagan stuff so hard, because the embrace of Russia by Trump is where you have seen the biggest break from Trump rhetorically so far in the first few weeks that we've been here. Slotkin was smart to hit that very hard because it's where the biggest fissure is right now in the Republican Party. Because what we need is we need a bunch of Republicans to break off and decide with us to stop what Trump is doing, to stop the madness. The place where the biggest fissure is right now, the biggest crack, is over what he's doing with Putin. And that's why Slotkin hit that so hard last night. The second place is on the budget. And you've seen House Republicans being very nervous about pursuing the Medicaid cuts and the big tax cuts for wealthy people, because it's so obviously against the whole way that they campaigned in 2024. And you've also seen cracks start to emerge around what Musk is doing in two ways. One is just the rampant cuts that are affecting Republicans in their districts, the programmatic cuts and also staffing cuts. There were meetings today. Musk had to go meet with the House and Senate Republicans in separate meetings to sort of explain what he was doing. And also because of just the rampant illegality. And you're seeing Republicans start to stand up more, at least rhetorically, right? And again, a small crack becomes a big crack. A little win becomes a big win when we continue to apply pressure. And I think the fact that Musk had to go meet, the great Musk had to go meet with these lowly, legislators today and sort of, dirty himself by having to actually go talk to people in Congress and acknowledge that Congress is a legitimate part of our government was important. I mean, this was, again, an important development if we are going to get to the other side of where we are. And so the other thing that I'm happy about is the Slotkin speech. And if you've been reading my stuff over the last few days, you know that what I have been advocating is for us to develop a second front. I think Democrats have spent a lot of time properly pushing on the economic piece, raising higher prices, plutocratic tax policy, the tariffs. We've been living there for the last few weeks. And I think that's been really smart because Trump's numbers are coming down. There's an incredible vulnerability here. And they know the Republicans are worried about the budget vote that's going to come up. So that's been smart and effective. But we need to do more. We needed to open up a second front. We can do more than one thing at a time. And we needed to start developing a far clearer language around what Trump and Musk were doing to dismantle, disassemble the United States government and its ongoing attack on what I call the four freedoms, which is democracy here at home and the global rules-based order abroad. We have been too absent in that conversation, and we need to develop it. Slotkin last night, Senator Slotkin, did a great job in opening up that second front. She had three things she talked about: the economy, national security, right, being safe, and democracy preservation. So she went there last night in a way that had been hard, frankly, for many of our political leaders in this country to have gone. And she opened up new space, rhetorical space. And I think what's really important now, and also what you saw this week, you started seeing the House Democrats really up their game. They filed an amicus brief in one of the court cases. They are holding tomorrow their first shadow hearing, as they're calling it, on the Medicaid cuts, where they're just doing their own hearing. They're not waiting to do it underneath a Republican banner. They launched incredibly powerful ads in 23 Republican districts over the last 48 hours, attacking them on the Medicaid cuts, going on offense, spending money, taking the argument to them. We see tonight Hakeem Jeffries is doing an event at 9 o'clock, which some of you should go to, with Ken Martin, talking to the grassroots and all of us about their plans and hearing back from us. You've seen a huge escalation on the House side of activity in the way that I think we've all wanted, right? We've been lobbying them to do these things, amicus brief, public hearings, right? Shadow hearings, you know, working with the DNC more cooperatively. These are all things that have been in the work that we have been doing, that we've been communicating to these offices. And it's great to see the House Democrats going on offense. The Senate needs to match them at some point. And I think the Senate has been a little bit slower, but Slotkin did a great job last night in creating this. And I think now, for me, the most important thing we have to do is to develop the second front and to start talking in clear, plain language that what Donald Trump is doing is betraying America. He is what they're doing, what he and Musk are doing is illegal, unconstitutional, and wrong. And we need to start introducing these words of illegality and betrayal into the common understanding. Musk can't, we need to make Musk not a reformer, but a criminal. This guy has committed more crimes in Washington, than probably anybody in our history, right? Anybody in our history. The number of laws that he has broken, Elon Musk, in the last few weeks, is probably more than anybody in the history of the United States when you add up what they're doing. And we are not using words like criminal and law breaking, crime spree, unconstitutional, betrayal of the country, right? And I think this is an area of enormous opportunity. I think Slotkin opened the door to that last night, which is why I think that's really important. And if you can join me, if there's one thing, I give a list every day at Hopium of the things that we work on. And I talked to Heather Cox Richardson about this today, is that I think it's really important now, given what I just said, that we push our House and Senate leaders through the rest of this week to do what I've been calling this letter to America, which is a simple, similar to the Declaration of Independence. Every House and Senate Democrat needs to go on record in a single letter explaining why they believe what Donald Trump is doing is illegal, unconstitutional, and wrong. It needs to be a single document that we can all use. It needs to become something put into every amicus brief in every legal case. The reason why is that, the language that our founding fathers used in the Declaration was injuries, abuses, and usurpations when they described Mad King George III. Usurpations is exactly what's happening right now. Trump is usurping the power of the legislative branch. And the people in the legislative branch have an obligation to explain that to America, that this is what they're doing, that their powers are being usurped by this mad king and this madman and his henchman, Elon Musk, because the absence of that document is a very loud sound, right? It's very loud that the legislative branch itself, the Democrats in the legislative branch, which is half of the Congress, right, have not gone on the record in a clear way explaining why it is they believe, as people honoring their oath of protecting the Constitution. The Constitution is under unprecedented assault by Trump and Musk right now, and our Democratic leaders have got to issue a simple document explaining to the American people why they think that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are breaking the law, acting unconstitutionally, and that they need to stop. They need to do this now because we have momentum in the courts today. We had a big day in the courts, and we've had momentum. We've had wins, and little wins can become big wins. But today, I think, was kind of a really big day in the courts. It's sort of a sense that we now have more profound momentum. And this notion that he would just win, the Supreme Court would just roll over and validate everything they were going to do, well, that's no longer true. I mean, we're probably going to have bad losses in the Supreme Court. I'm not being Pollyannish about this, but you don't know how these things go, right? The truth is what Trump and Musk are doing is so wildly illegal and unconstitutional and batshit fucking crazy that, it's shame on us for not having been more aggressive about labeling this what it is. And it's where I think we have incredible opportunity now as a family, because I do think the economic story, I do believe that from the data we're seeing from the consumer confidence data and from the polling data, the notion that Trump means higher prices and more struggle for your family and huge tax cuts for wealthy and less for you, that stuff is getting baked into the cake. He's got a big problem. He's way underwater now in many of these polls on the economy. Let me give you a data point. In the University of Michigan survey, which is scaled from like 0 to 120 or so, Trump was at 100 during his first term on consumer confidence, which was very high during his first term up until the pandemic. Today, he's at 65, right? In the last one, he's at 65. He's lost a third, the consumer confidence has dropped. He's lost a third of that rating has disappeared for him. He's in a very weakened position there. And Democrats are right to keep pounding there. But we need to open up the second front because I don't think the American people support the idea of a president acting lawlessly or unconstitutionally or backing a genocidal dictator. And I think that part of the things that we have to recognize, to me, and I'll just close with this, is the ferocity of what they're doing feels like Putin's, the genocidal madness of Putin in Ukraine. I think that the kind of intensity of the attack on the United States right now that we're undergoing has the same kind of irrational, undemocratic, Russia first, not America first kind of sensibility of the way that Putin has prosecuted the campaign in Ukraine. And I think that's why it's critical now that we really make this second front central to everything we do together because the country is under attack. And as I've said in my writing, things are being broken now. They're going to be very, very hard to repair. And we are for the future of our country, and as somebody who has got three kids who are 24, 22, and 19, watching their futures, be destroyed by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, all of us here, for the good of our kids and our grandkids and the kids and the grandkids of all the people of the world, we got to fucking leave it all on the playing field, everybody, right? We have to explain to our elected officials what's required of them now because things are being broken that are going to be very hard to repair. And that's why, including our standing in the world, the our alliances that have kept us safe. I mean, one of the craziest things that's happening about what's happening with Russia right now, Trump and Putin, is imagine making the argument that somehow the United States is safer and more secure today outside of NATO than we are inside this 80-year-old alliance set of alliances that we've had with other nuclear powers, their military and everything else. Donald Trump, we are more vulnerable to an outside attack of some kind today than any time in American history since the War of 1812. And Donald Trump has not only destroying our economy, he's ripping down the pillars of our prosperity, he's attacking our democracy, he's betraying the country in a way that no one has ever done before in our history. He's also making us vulnerable to some kind of devastating attack that is unprecedented in all of our history. And so, we have a lot of work to do. I feel like we had a good day today. And you've heard me talk about, we got to do one day at a time here, everybody, right? We got to have a good day every day and do our best, go 1-0 that day, as the Nats used to say. We had a good day today. I think last night he looked like a crazy buffoon. And I don't think he gained a single additional supporter in that speech last night. So let's go to work. Love you guys. I've been so proud to be in this fight with all of you. Part of what's keeping me sane is getting up every day and being in community with you, knowing that this community is raising money, going to work, being gritty, getting the work done. And we're fighting really hard, everybody. I'm really proud of that. And I also want to say happy birthday or happy anniversary to this community. We'll be 2 years old on Friday. And we've done a lot of good, but the most important work that we have is still ahead of us. Thanks, everybody. Let me get to some questions and Lincoln, if my Lincoln, who's now working with me, um, the yeah, can you just scour the questions? I'll look at the questions too, the Q&A, and to see if there are things that are popping out to you. Yeah, there are a couple, let me just see yeah, I mean, Pam asks, I have phone anxiety. I don't really like to call. Um, yeah, any contact is better than no contact, right? Just bottom line. And is it Mary? I think it's Mary, right? Simon, can we have a group editing of a vision statement, Ray, the value and specialness of American democracy from the discussion with Heather? It's an interesting idea. Let me think about that. I don't want to be, there is, having worked as an advisor to elected officials here. By the way, my camera just pulled out. I don't know what it's doing, but there it is. The there are there's a limit to how much I have found working as an advisor to Democratic politicians for over 30 years, that there is a limit to how far you can go in advocacy and telling them what to do, right? Um, and I want to think about that, Mary. It's a good challenge to me, and I want to think about it because I was on with a prominent senator yesterday, and we were talking about this, and he said, who would write this document? And I said, Michael Beschloss, Jamie Raskin, right? Like, Heather Cox Richardson, they would all die to help give you language for this. We could pull this together in 24, 48 hours, right? And so I am working very hard. I want all of you to know that I don't talk about what I do when I'm not writing Hopium and the phone calls and the meetings that I have, but I am in the mix here with everybody here, and I'm doing what I'm asking you to do, which is that I am calling senators and House members that I know and the leadership offices, and I'm working really hard to push all the stuff that I'm writing about to get it to happen. And let's review what's happened just in the last few days, right? We had an amicus brief. We've been talking about that for weeks. We had hearings starting tomorrow, right? That we wanted that to happen. Hakeem Jeffries is now openly working with the Democratic Party, the DNC, and Ken Martin. That was another part of our core recommendations here, that we wanted to see greater collaboration between the Senate, the House, and the DNC to start building this movement into something far more powerful than it is. We need to view ourselves as being in this together in a single opposition movement where we're all doing our part. I feel like tonight's meeting with Ken Martin and Hakeem is a really important step forward. John Meacham, yeah, somebody just wrote John Meacham, right? And the yeah, daily press conferences. I mean, I've been arguing for that weeks. I don't know why that hasn't happened. I also want to say that when you talk to the Senate offices and the House offices, our folks, you should be asking them to collaborate with the other chamber. I mean, I said this to a senator yesterday. How in the world can I just, I love everybody. These are my friends. But how in the world did the Senate Democrats not sign on to the House Democrats' amicus brief? How come this hearing tomorrow is not a joint House and Senate hearing? It's a House hearing only. Schumer, I mean, I don't know what's going on and I don't understand, but the idea that the House and Senate Democrats are not working on this together is a little shocking. And honestly, the laggard here is the Senate. And we got to light a fire. I mean, the House, they built a whole committee. They have a whole group that Jamie Raskin, Joe Neguse, they're litigating and coming up with strategies. They came up with this idea of the hearing, right? I'm feeding stuff into that. They have a whole team of people working on the second front. The Senate doesn't. And so, we've got to push the Senate. If they're a little behind, they can learn from what the House is doing. They should be doing these things jointly as much as possible. I mean, people have to have their own space and have their hearings and get their media time. But my God, I mean, the Senate's we got to wake the Senate up here a little bit. I think Slotkin gave the Senate Democrats a huge jolt last night. I think her great speech, her powerful speech, her patriotic speech was important, I think, in lifting them up. And the Yeah, a question that comes up all the time is contacting legislators who you don't represent. I am in generally against that. I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to do it, right? But in these offices, if you're calling from out of state or out of the district, they just don't, they don't care. I mean, they just don't. Somebody may be really polite, but they don't write anything down. It's like it doesn't happen. And so I don't know that you should do that. I don't know that's a good use of your time, as frustrating as that may be. I do think one of the things we're hearing about in Hopium, the self-reports, is people are organizing meetings where 10 constituents will go together to meet with a staffer in the local office, the Senate or House office, and have a discussion about these things. That's really important. That's not a protest, right? That's we're constituents. We want to come in and share our concerns. That's been effective. People have done that all across the country. It's not as shiny as a protest or a town hall meeting or something, but it's effective. And I talked to Heather Cox Richardson today about how proud I am, frankly, of all of you that we have made this thing about contacting our representatives. It's such an affirmation of a democracy, right? This action that we're doing is not just strengthening the opposition movement, it's strengthening our democracy itself. These are people that work for us, and we're acting that way. And it is, and all of you are learning how to do that. And for the person who said phone anxiety, and have anxiety about contact or not used to doing it, I just want you to know that tens of thousands of your fellow Americans have gotten over all of these anxieties and concerns and are doing this work. So be inspired by them, right? And that, these are just everyday people going in and letting their representatives know what they expect out of them now, giving them ideas how to raise their game. This is part of what we're doing is we're coaching them about how to become more effective for all of us because they're really busy and they're being legislators. Now you're trying to teach, as I use the line, old dogs, new tricks, right? We're teaching these old dogs some new tricks. And it's tricks that we're learning in this community together that we're doing all across the country. Um, Jerry wrote, how do we explain the positive response to his speech last night? There was not a positive response to his speech last night. There was polling of the people who watched, which was probably almost entirely Republicans. I didn't watch the speech. I tried to watch the first few minutes of it, but I was so overwhelmed by the lying and just the outrageous levels of lying. Things were so obviously not true that I couldn't watch. There was not a positive response to the speech last night. There were just a bunch of Republicans who saw their guy last night. Um, Let me just go to other questions here. Um, Let me look at what Lincoln's sending me to. Yeah, I mean, these are all in the same vein, a lot of these questions. William Jeffress wrote, what do I think of James Carville rope-a-dope strategy? I think it's really fucking wrong and irresponsible that he wrote that. And I think that in a time, it is a complete, I love James, he's my buddy. But, this is the idea that we should be standing down and letting them ravage the country right now and attack the country without defending it. It's just absurd. And I don't really understand how this got into James's head. I think I love James. He's was a mentor of mine. I worked for him in 92, but I think he got this one really wrong. And I think it's a misunderstanding of the nature of the information game here. One of the reasons we didn't win the election in 2024 is we did not adequately indict Trump. We did not run enough negative ads. The ads that we ran were very late. We did not rough him up. And the way that we know that is his approval rating went up through the entire general election as if there wasn't a campaign being run against him. I mean, there's no scenario where a competent campaign run by our side that you would have seen, Trump's approval rating go up. And the fact that his approval rating went up during the campaign meant that our campaign was ineffective and didn't degrade him and didn't remind people about all the ugliness. I mean, think about all the ugliness that's happened in the last 6 weeks. We all knew this was coming, and we were unable to take this level, this historic level of ugliness and betrayal of the country and turn it into something material in the election. I mean, we have to be very clear that Future Forward, the super PAC, whose main job was to degrade Trump, ran almost negative ads and was the biggest political failure in modern Democratic Party history that's cost the country terribly. And so we have to learn from that. And the key thing, I want to address this issue about learning from mistakes. And let me talk about this for a minute, because this came up in our chat today, and this is really important. Um, we are going to make mistakes. You're going to be unhappy with some of the votes that senators and House members make. We are in a crisis, and it is not totally clear what to do. I mean, the notion that there are a single path or a single way, we're a big, diverse coalition, and our diversity is our strength. And we don't want to be singing from a single hymnal. We don't want to be unified. Coalitions aren't unified. Coalitions are a strive for consensus, not unity. Unity is static. What we want is a dynamic consensus. We also want the very voices of our family contributing in whatever way it's appropriate. I don't agree with Bernie Sanders on a lot of stuff, but I appreciate what he's doing. But that doesn't mean what Bernie's doing is what I have to do, or what Slotkin has to do, or what Jeffries has to do. We're all playing different positions on the same team, is the way that I like to talk about this. And we have to be comfortable with that. This whole notion that we have to have a single message and be unified, that's never going to happen. And it's an aspiration that I think is inconsistent with how democracies work, frankly, and how our party works. And so I see this as more of a chorus of people singing different notes, but it comes together in harmony, right? And together at the end. But one thing that's really important, and I should have brought this up in the opening remarks, is this what came up with Slotkin in our conversation today and also on the internet today was the notion that she had voted for a few Republicans and therefore she was illegitimate or that people couldn't take her seriously. And I just got to tell you, like, are we at a point where we're going to hold grudges against some of our most important politicians? She won one of the most important elections in the country in 2024, is obviously a proud patriot, an incredibly competent and capable young rising star politician, that because you didn't like some of the votes she took, then you're going to spend your time denigrating her and taking her down instead of lifting her up. I will just tell you that this thing that's going around where we're going to hold Democrats accountable for the votes that you didn't like is some of the most corrosive politics that I have ever seen. Because if we're going to defeat Trump, we're going to need Republicans to come over to us and work with us. And are you going to spend your time denigrating and attacking Republicans when they start breaking from Trump because some vote they took that you didn't like? I mean, we're going to have a level of pragmatism and forgiveness here over people making mistakes, learning from them, right? Learning from those mistakes. But when people do good things, and Alyssa Slotkin gave a really good speech last night, and for the impulse to be like, well, my engagement with her is going to be, I didn't like this vote she made on this one guy, as opposed to saying, thank you for being a proud patriot and standing up in front of the country and challenging Trump in a very eloquent and powerful way, right? Then you are taking us down. These are demobilizing actions. These are things that cause people to disengage. And what you're doing is you're reinforcing that you believe the Democratic Party is weak rather than it being strong. Well, that's MAGA's argument. You're making MAGA's argument against us, right? And the key, I'm not asking you to be Pollyannish, right? But to spend people's time getting up today instead of talking about the content of the speech, bitching and moaning about a couple votes that she had taken a few weeks ago. Wait till you start having like people like Lisa Murkowski and other Republicans come over to our side in fighting Trump. We have to be welcoming to people. We have to be forgiving. People are navigating their way through this, right? And what we have to do is when people come over to our side and are making arguments, we need to be praising them. This is part of the thing we've been talking about here. When politicians and respect and you are your constituent, when they do the right thing, you need to let them know. And so I think this kind of I've just been surprised by it, frankly, this notion that there are now illegitimate Democrats because of some of the votes they took on the cabinet officials that were going to pass anyway. I think we are better than that. We have to be smarter than that. We have to be more pragmatic than that. You know, the thing we have to resist at all costs is factionalism. And what factionalism is choosing to fight with other Democrats than to put your energy into fighting the Republicans and Trump. If you choose to spend your time fighting Democrats, you are guaranteeing that we're going to lose and he will win. The only way we win is if we fight them and we recognize that we are a diverse group of people that are not going to agree on everything. We're a coalition, right? And I don't agree with Bernie Sanders, but I'm on the same team with him, and I'm not spending my time bitching and moaning about the things that I don't like that Bernie says, right? I spend my time trying to move this ball forward, and I think that you guys have to, as much as you can, try to emulate that kind of sensibility, as unnatural and uncomfortable as it may feel. Because the way that we guarantee the fascists being in power for a generation and destroying the lives and opportunities for my children is if we fight with each other instead of fight with them. We can disagree without being disagreeable. We can have debates internally as we did in our chat today, but we can't fight with each other. We can't descend into factionalism. We're going to disagree. I'm not going to be happy. I'm not happy with Chuck Schumer and what he's been doing. Really honest. Like, He should be doing more. But I'm not getting up every day beating the shit out of him. I'm beating the shit out of Trump, right? Which is where we've got to keep our focus. And so it's really important to not give in to the community stuff that's happening that wants to create factional internal party war, because there's no possibility of us winning against Trump if that happens. If we have a big chunk of our family deciding to engage in factional fighting over who's the best Democrat, and these guys are doing it this way, and I don't like what happened over here. I don't like a whole lot of stuff. I let it go by, right? It's I gotta stay focused on the mission here, and this is really important, everybody. And I need to make like a video about this, because this is, in my view, this kind of factional fighting, the attack on Slotkin for her 4 votes that people didn't like, is self-indulgent and corrosive, because it's demobilizing. It brings us down. It makes us weak instead of making us strong, which is and as I said today in the meeting with Heather Cox Richardson, I think Trump is weaker than he appears and we are stronger. We have more power together than we understand. We just aren't organized properly yet to be able to tap into the power that's clearly latent, that's out there, that we've seen in the Democratic grassroots in the last few weeks, in a powerful speech last night, in Hakeem clearly raising his game and taking on a bigger role in the last few weeks. We're getting there. Are we behind or we want to be? Absolutely not. Am I frustrated and angry about what's happened? Of course I am. But I'm not spending my time bringing that frustration and anger here into this community and all of you, because it becomes demobilizing, right? And I find it to be unproductive and corrosive. And so what I'm focusing on here is, how do we keep taking the next hill? How do we keep moving forward? What are the strategies now that we've opened up the second front? What can we do now? And that's what I try to do. And that's what I've been doing in my career for a long time. I'm a strategist, right? I look at strategy. It's like chess. I was a chess prodigy when I was a kid, and I was watching that movie about the woman who played chess, that all Queen's Gambit, that I'm sure many of you have seen. And I watched it 4 or 5 years ago, I think, when it came out, an amazing movie. And I realized in watching that movie that a lot of the way that I think is derived from chess, where you're having to move 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. You have to think ahead and plan ahead. And in my entire adult life, I had never really connected that to the years and years of when I played chess competitively as a younger person, um, which I eventually gave up because it was just, chess is insane, right? It's crazy to maintain over time. But that training of that I received in playing competitive chess as a young person and trying to think ahead 4 or 5 moves, I realize, has been essential to the way that I've operated as an adult in this business over a long period of time. And I think now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep our eyes on the horizon and how we get to where we need to go, which is we have to save our democracy and get to the other side of Trump and MAGA. Okay, let me look at other questions. Lincoln is sending me summaries of things you guys are putting out here. Yeah, I look, I mean, there's a question about a senator who said something last night praising, I think that my advice to all of you is that you can choose to be perpetually disappointed, or you can expect to be disappointed and get beyond it and move on and go do the work. I think that being perpetually disappointed is a choice. And it's a choice, it's a self-indulgent choice, in my view. It's not something, that we have time to deal with. I think these guys are doing the best they can. I think we're all dealing with unprecedented circumstances now. And if you choose to spend your day being disappointed in Democrats, you're going to be disappointed a lot. I mean, because we're not in power. I mean, they're in power, and we're all doing the best we can. And our job here at Hopium is to lift people up and not push them down, right? Because we're in a time of crisis, and it's a different sensibility, I think, here. But this is what I believe, and having worked in this business for a long time, that we talked one of these talks a few weeks ago about being the difference between good coaches and bad coaches in sports. Good coaches lift people up and help them achieve their potential. Bad coaches push people down and cause them to, underperform. Be a good coach. Don't be a bad coach, in my view, you know? Um, okay, let me look at a few more questions. Yeah, look, um, there's so many interesting questions here. Let me try to. Yeah, I mean, a thing that happened today, let's talk about this, is we now know that the Marshal Service has been briefing judges that they're getting death threats. And there's been some aggressive stuff that's happening because Elon is we have to recognize that this kind of stuff is not only coming from MAGA, but it's also coming from Russia, right? Russia created some of the bomb scares for Trump, on election day and various places. It's very easy to create, if you're a modern intelligence service, to, make a threatening phone call or create a bomb scare, right? These things are very easy. And yeah, there's no question um, that our judges who have been making these tough decisions against Trump are under unbelievable political pressure. And we know from other authoritarian regimes that, the fear of dying or having your family kidnapped or whatever happens in these judges. This is why in some countries judges are masked and they're anonymous when they make tough decisions about the mafia or other things in order to protect their family. Yeah, we're entering this stage of this. But I also don't want to overplay it because the truth is we haven't had political violence in the US since 2021. I don't want to overestimate and give Trump power that he doesn't have. There's a big difference between, you know, a bomb threat and then, somebody getting attacked. And I don't we can't go to catastrophize, right? Like we can't go to a place where, they got roaming bands that are attacking people and we're not there yet. And we still have police in the United States and there's still local and state police and it will be, and there are protection services. Some of the judges are now getting round the clock protection, and it's something we have to monitor. But we also can't, again, we can't give Trump power that he doesn't have himself, and we have to be careful not to exaggerate the threat of this either, and to be wise about it and clear-eyed. Um, Lots of great questions here today. I mean, I really. Um, let me just say a few things about um, how, just to sort of close, how I think this is all going to happen, right? I think the way this is going to happen is that it's going to happen one day at a time. That we're going to do things that are going to work. We're going to learn from them. Those tactics and strategies will spread across the country. But what happens with the kind of actions we're taking when you email your friends to say, will you come to a rally or can you come to this teletown hall? One of the things that I would encourage you all to do is to try to expand the circle of people that are taking action. Bring them into Hopium, right? Help grow Hopium. But if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. I think part of our job now here as Hopium folks is to start encouraging, creating permission structures for other people to take actions of any kind. I mean, one of the reasons I've always liked the postcarding work that gets done in this family is that it's allowing people who, for whatever reason in their lives, that's the only thing they can do, right? They don't like to door knock and they don't like to call people and they may be old and so they, have limited ability to do other things. And I have this view that people always ask me, what's the best thing to do? And my answer is the best thing to do is whatever you're going to do the most of, right? Because the more that you're doing, this collective energy that gets generated, the contacts, it becomes self-perpetuating, right? People see others doing work, then they follow them. And we have to create permission structure for all this work. And that's one of the reasons why the sort of bottom-up grassroots movement that's happened in the US has been so successful, is because it creates permission structure for people to get into the game by people that were not themselves in the game 10 years ago or 8 years ago. It's not me, a political professional. It's moms and dads and regular folks who like became converted and started doing this work. And now they're enormously effective ambassadors to others to come do this work. We have to get very loud, but I think what's happening is we're also learning and we're going to be making mistakes. But the key thing is we have to learn from them. Mistakes are going to be made. We have to anticipate that. We have to learn from it. And the second thing is, and one of the things that I loved about what Alyssa Slotkin said last night at the end, where she talked about the importance of grassroots and bottom up and doing all this work, I felt like she'd been reading Hopium a little bit. was that she said, take one issue. You've heard me say this. She actually said something that was very similar to what I talk about with you, which is that master one thing, have one thing be the thing that makes you upset about Trump. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It could be Ukraine, it can be the vaporizing of USAID, it could be his illegal stuff, it could be he's about to okay this draconian abortion law in Idaho. Make this one thing, and when you're in company with people who may not be political, right? And you're trying to convince them to become more political or to turn against Trump, say, listen, there are a lot of reasons that Trump is not doing right for the country. But let me tell you about what is most important to me, why I am here talking to you, why I'm upset. This is the thing. You don't have to have talking points. You don't have to have a book. You don't have to give a big speech. You have to be a concerned citizen that says to another concerned citizen, let me tell you what worries me and why I'm working against Trump. You may have your own reasons, but let me tell you what's important to me. That passion, that intensity that you bring is the thing that causes the sale, right? That's when you motivate people. That's when you bring people along. You don't need talking points. You don't need to be me. You haven't don't have 30 years of policy work that I've done here in Washington. That's okay. Pick one thing and become expert in it and really understand it and learn it and use it. And Slotkin talked about that last night, and she's really right about that. To me, we're going to go build this opposition movement one day at a time, one person at a time. We're building it every day. We do this work. We're building it right now in this environment that we're in. And we're growing the opposition movement. Our job, though, in addition to all the work we're doing, is we've got to expand the pool of people who are joining us and to recognize that the work, protests are only one small piece of the tools that we're all using right now. And it's an important piece. It matters. And as we get warmer, there'll be more outdoor stuff. I think these anti-Tesla protests, which have sprung up all across the country, have been really great, right? And I assume that this summer or late spring, there's going to be a huge march on Washington. I assume that's going to happen. I don't know, who's going to organize that. It's going to be a major undertaking that's going to require a very serious professional organization, not some of these organizations that exist that have two people, right, that are doing this part time. I mean, producing an event with 1 million people requires incredible organizing, and particularly given that it will be received hostilely, by the government here. Um, but I want to end by saying that I'm weirdly more optimistic tonight than I was 48 hours ago. I think what happened with Trump and Zelensky was devastating for me personally, and for the sense of betrayal that it represented and the abandonment. The fact that on Saturday there was a meeting, or on Sunday there was a meeting in London with all the free nations of the world, and we were not there, is the first time that's happened in over 100 years. And the sense of betrayal that Europeans feel towards our government, and that Trudeau and that video I sent you expressed, it's profound. And our reputation in the world will never be the same after all this. But I'll say this, that Donald Trump is weaker than he appears, and we are stronger. We have won most of the elections since 2016. Not this last one, and that mattered, but we've won most of the other ones. His approval rating is dropping, consumer confidence is dropping, his economic plan is idiotic and plutocratic and just ridiculous, and the American people are turning against him incredibly. And I feel like our party is really in a strong place in the economic conversation, and we have to stay there and prosecute that every day. It really matters, and using sort of conventional understandings of politics. But we're not in a conventional moment. We're in a unusual moment, and we have to expand our understanding of what conventional is. And that's why opening up the second front and really labeling Trump as the greatest betrayer of America there's ever been, a serial criminal, a acting unconstitutionally, committing crimes every day, stealing money, right? Carving up the government for his oligarchical buddies the way they did in Russia. This whole part of the conversation, we have to push harder. We've got to push our electeds to raise their gaze and go higher and defend and stick to and defend their oath, right? To stick to their oath, which is that oath wasn't about defending Americans against $8 carton of eggs. It was about defending the Constitution, and the Constitution is under unprecedented threat. And part of what we have to do together in helping our elected officials, leaders understand what's required of them now is they have to go there now. There isn't any excuse. The viciousness in which they're dismantling the US government and our global reputation is something that we just simply have to try to stop with everything that's in our power. And we're not doing enough, and we need to do more. I think Alyssa Slot can open the door to that. And let's follow her leadership and go into this place together where Heather Cox Richardson asked me today, and this will be my close, what's going to be the messaging and the sensibility about this opposition movement? And I said, it's very simple in some ways. It's what I write every day, is that we are Americans. Defending freedom and democracy is what we do. It's been what we've done for 250 years. It's who we are. And that we have to claim the mantle of patriotism and love of country and the American flag. We're defending America. They're attacking it. That's a very strong position place for us. But we can't get there by just talking about Medicaid and about the plutocratic tax policy. We have to go into this other place if we're really going to wave the flag and tap into I think, the most powerful emotion of all, which is love of country and patriotism. And I think we can do that. And I think when we do both, we open up two fronts. We will be much stronger and more powerful, and they will be even ever weaker. I love you guys. This has been I am like all of you. I'm trying to keep it together every day, and part of the way I keep it together is by hanging out with you guys every day. And so, your energy, your passion, your grit, your love of country is what's motivating me and getting me to do that work. Because every morning I get up and I'm like, I got to do my best for all you. I got to give you the best thing I can possibly deliver for you every day, because I know we're in this time really matters for us, and losing is not an option. So keep fighting hard. And remember, we are Americans. Fighting for freedom and democracy is what we do. It's who we are, and we're going to prevail. It's going to be a lot of work, but we got to get it done. Thanks all. Take care.